Hey, what's going on, guys? J-Mac here. So, patch 2.4 has been released on the PTR servers, and it is a gigantic patch, man, with tons of changes across the board for all the classes. It's too big of a patch for me to go over the entire thing in one video, so we're going to do just the Witch Doctor stuff for this particular video, and then I may do some other videos for the other classes and things like that later and tell you my thoughts on those classes. But for now, let's go over just the Witch Doctor changes, and kind of the showcase for this patch for Witch Doctor is the rework to the Jade Harvester set, which a lot of people have been really looking forward to. And it looks really good so far. The damage is pretty crazy. It may need some survivability tweaks, but I think their goal for this patch is to have it be kind of the pushing go-to spec for solo in Season 5. And right now, it isn't the strongest thing going on just because the Litany of the Undaunted and Wailing Host revamp with Carnival and things like that is just absolutely nuts at the moment, which we'll go over later, talk about a little bit more in depth if you haven't heard about it or seen it on the PTR. But that's one thing you need to keep in mind, though. This is the PTR. This is the very first patch, and things are always overtuned and undertuned in the first patch. It's how it always is. There's going to be 2 to 4 patches over the course of the next month and a half or so, and each patch will have gigantic changes across the board and will balance things before the patch goes live. So just always keep that in mind, that the things that you're seeing happening right now on the PTR in this patch are not going to be anywhere near what it's going to look like by the time the PTR ends. I mean, think about patch 2.3 with Helltooth. Helltooth was absolute trash in the first patch. Absolute garbage. By the end of the PTR, Helltooth ran very smoothly and was the go-to spec with zombie bears. So you gotta look at that, and you gotta look at you know, where things are with like Carnival and stuff like that right now. I don't think they want Carnival to be the go-to solo spec. That's not what they're trying to do with this patch from the looks of things. So more than likely you're gonna see some nerfs. But anyways, let's go ahead and get right into it with the abilities. Alright, first up, active skills, Fire Bats with the skill rune Cloud of Bats. The radius has been increased from 12 to 15 yards. In 2.3, they increased it from 8 to 12 yards, and then now 12 to 15 yards. And it's probably about the sweet spot for it, although 20 would be really nice. There's some new items to make Cloud of Bats hopefully viable in this patch, and we'll see, time will tell. Prior to Reaper of Souls, there were attack speed breakpoints for Cloud of Bats, and I would assume that those are still intact. Similar to how Carnival works currently with attack speed breakpoints. And so more than likely, if this does become a spec, we're going to be looking into trying to hit specific breakpoints to optimize damage. But time will tell as the PTR goes on and see if it's actually going to be good, and if it's worth the time investment to really test with the breakpoints and all that good stuff. Grasp of the Dead, skill rune Reign of Corpses. Duration in which the total damage is dealt reduced from 8 to 3 seconds. So basically it's dealing its damage much quicker, which is a damage increase. And the effects of this rune can now stack. Now there's a new item that allows you to basically just spam Grasp of the Dead. So I don't think this is going to be like a pushing build or anything like that, but it may be a really fun build for some people that love the Grasp of the Dead ability and Reign of Corpses in general. It can maybe do some Torment 8 to 10 farming with it, potentially with some other items and stuff like that. So that's pretty cool. Haunt, skill rune Draining Spirits, damage type changed from cold to physical. Not really much to see there, just a damage rune change. Hex, skill rune Toad of Hugeness will now lick and slow enemies rather than swallow them, while you have the Spirit of Arakir 4-set bonus equipped. Now anybody that's playing patch 2.3 right now on the live servers, if you're running Arakir, at times the Toad will just swallow a single target, and while the single target is swallowed, you can't deal damage to it. And that's a problem. It's going to slow down your speed farm. You're trying to speed farm Torment 8, and you know it's slowing you down. So this is a nice quality of life change if you want to continue to run 4-piece Arakir in some way. In 2.4, it's not going to do that anymore. Horrify. Cooldown reduced from 12 to 10 seconds. Now you're going to see that Spirit Vessel has been reworked to where it doesn't reduce the cooldown of Horrify, Soul Harvest, or Spirit Walk anymore, and then the cooldowns of those abilities have been retuned to compensate. So this is down to 10 seconds, and then the skill rune Frightening Aspect, armor bonus increased from 35% to 50%. Really nice toughness increase. This is probably going to be ran a good bit in like pushing Jade builds. I would assume 50% increased armor is quite a bit. Locust Swarm, Skill Rune, Diseased Swarm. Increased damage from 75% to 750% weapon damage. And this is the rune that leaves a cloud of insects on the ground after you kill an enemy. I don't see this being good in Jade Harvester, mainly because that 750% damage isn't getting multiplied by anything in Jade, and you're not going to be like blowing up the 750% extra damage that's on the ground from enemies dying with Soul Harvest or anything like that. So I don't see it really being that good. Like 750% weapon damage is not very much if it's not being multiplied by anything. With that said, the 6-piece Arakir will multiply this damage, and it could be very good in potentially some sort of like Arakir, Cloud of Bats type build. I don't know exactly, but maybe something like that. Mass Confusion, Skill Rune, Paranoia. Damage amplification increased from 20% to 30%. I would say that makes it probably viable enough to run in certain builds. Soul Harvest, cooldown reduced from 15 to 12 seconds, and then the Skill Rune, Languish, has been reworked. Now grants 10% armor per stack, up to a maximum of 5 stacks. So at 5 stacks, you're looking at 50% increased armor, which is a really nice upgrade. If you run the Sacred Harvester Ceremonial Knife, you get up to 10 stacks of Soul Harvest, which means 100% more armor. And there's also some new bracers in this patch that give you 5% damage reduction per stack of Soul Harvest. So with the Sacred Harvester, you're looking at 100% more armor and 50% damage reduction, as well as more movement speed with the Soul to Waste rune of Soul Harvest, and you're getting more intelligence. I would say that the Sacred Harvester Ceremonial Knife is going to be one of the go-to weapons for pushing in solo progression with Jade Harvester. I don't know if you're going to wear it on your character yet, or if you're going to cube it, or what you're going to do exactly, but I can't imagine not running it. You get so much toughness out of that thing, as well as some utility and a little bit more damage. Spirit Barrage has got some buffs. Weapon damage increased from 425 to 600%. Skill Rune, I'm not going to try to pronounce that, has been redesigned. Now grants life each time Spirit Barrage hits. And the Skill Rune, Manitou, damage increased from 2900 to 6000% weapon damage over 20 seconds. And then there's a new Spirit Barrage, I believe it's a ceremonial knife, or maybe it's a dagger, that does some things for Spirit Barrage, increases its damage and things like that. So again, another ability and spec that I don't see being, you know, like the go-to like meta spec for anything, but it's fun. A lot of people like Spirit Barrage, just like a lot of people like Grasp of the Dead. And then being able to make it work in like Torment 8 to Torment 10 is something that I think they're like trying to do with this patch a little bit, trying to make some more viable things and allow people to kind of pick and choose what they want to run for, at the very least, like Torment farming. You know, maybe not for, you know, Greater Rift 80 farming or something like that, but maybe for some Torment 8 to 10 farming. Spirit Walk. Cooldown reduced from 12 to 10 seconds, and the Skill Rune Severance has been redesigned. Now increases movement speed by an additional 100%. I've already done a good bit of testing with this when the PTR went live yesterday, and basically the old Ingeom Jade Harvester builds are really good now for Torment 10 farming. You're going to like one-shot pretty much everything with the revamped Jade, and then if you run Ingeom, you can pretty much have 100% uptime on this movement speed for the most part. And with the other movement speed bonuses, I would say that it can absolutely rival like Arakir builds with Mana Juma's set, or even like Helltooth Mana Juma's and stuff like that. I would say that it's probably better to just run something like that opposed to trying to run Mana Juma's with Jade Harvester, just because if you can have 100% movement speed from Severance and still be able to cast abilities, it's pretty nice. Whereas if you go into Angry Chicken, you can't do anything but use the explosion ability until you come out of Angry Chicken. So I think for just running Jade Harvester, Ingeom, and then kind of trying to abuse Severance with Ingeom is the way to go. Wall of Death. Damage increased from 1000% to 1200% weapon damage, and then the Surrounded by Death rune, duration increased from 4 to 5 seconds, and the damage increased from 1000% to 1250% weapon damage. A little bit of damage increase there. Passive skills, Creeping Death. The damage over time duration increased from 300 to 3600 seconds, and you'll see why when we get over the Jade stuff here in a little bit. Spirit Vessel, again, no longer reduces the cooldown of Spirit Walk, Horrify, and Soul Harvest by 2 seconds. And then the cooldowns of these skills has been reduced to compensate. Alright, next up we have the items, and we're just going to go over the stuff that is relevant to Witch Doctor. So, the Corruption Shoulders now roll with guaranteed golden health pickup radius, increased health globe, and potion healing. So these are the craftable shoulders. They basically took the profane pauldrons out of the game and then put that ability on these craftable shoulders, which is really nice for like the beginning of a season or something like that, to get that little bit of pickup radius early on. Depth Diggers, now I've heard these are actually working for the Witch Doctor class. I haven't tested it myself, but any ability that actually does generate mana, so I believe like Spine Dart, I think it's called, is a Poison Dart rune that will generate mana and some other things, actually are working with Depth Diggers. I've heard this from a few people. Not positive, I haven't tested it myself, but if so, that's a pretty cool change. They might as well allow us to use it. I mean, as long as it doesn't work with, like, Carnival pets, then I don't see why it would be a problem being, you know, able to use it early on in a season or something like that. I don't think it would ever be OP with, if it's just working with abilities that do actually generate a resource. Next up, we've got the Legacy of Nightmares revamp. Now, in my opinion, this is the coolest thing they've done in this patch. They've basically kind of taken the essence of, you know, like Diablo 2, where you weren't worried about sets. You were just kind of, you were trying to make a build, and there were specific legendaries that you wanted to get for that build, but it wasn't set bonuses, and you weren't pigeonholed as much. And this is what they're kind of trying to do with this, I think. So this is the Litany of the Undaunted Wailing Host set. While this is your only item set bonus, your damage dealt is increased by 800%, and damage taken is reduced by 4% for every ancient item you have equipped. So that's per ancient item. Now, right now, you know, from the looks of things, that's like way overtuned. 800% damage per ancient item is ridiculous. You've got Carnival has already cleared a level 90 Greater Rift solo with this setup, and I just don't think that's the intention. I mean, I seriously doubt it, but this in general makes a lot of different builds viable at like the mid-tier of gameplay, and then it should make some other builds viable for like high-end gameplay too. You know, probably something that comes to mind is like a full dedicated pet build without Carnival, like a Mask of Jerem, Tasker, and Theos type setup with Wrathful Protectors, like a fire build, stuff like that. Some cool things you'd be able to do without being pigeonholed into the Zuni set bonus. Like right now, there's like literally no reason to run Zuni Masa instead of this. Like the Zuni Masa is outclassed by this so much. The only reason you'd run Zuni is if you're going to go do the set dungeon. You know, you're trying to get the Zuni Masa set dungeon completed or something. This just outclasses it with Carnival in every single way. For one thing, also, you don't even have to tag enemies with this either. You're just getting the multiplier. So, anyways, once that actually gets tweaked to a point where it's not overpowered, because I feel like it's really overpowered at the moment, I think that's the coolest thing they did in this patch. Mantle of Channeling. Now this is some pretty nice shoulders. It's kind of interesting item that works for every class, a specific ability for every class. So while channeling Whirlwind, Rapid Fire, Strafe, Tempest Rush, Fire Bats, Arcane Torrent, Disintegrate, or Ray of Frost, you deal 20 to 25% increased damage and take 25% reduced damage. So for the Witch Doctor class, we're looking at a Cloud of Bats build with these shoulders, getting a nice damage increase and damage reduction out of one piece of gear. Really sick. I mean, like these in, you know, possibly like in a Rakier or Helltooth setup, because Fire Bats gets buffed by both of those specs, or alternatively, with the Legacy of Nightmares, could be really, really good at some point during this PTR. You know, you go like Legacy of Nightmares with the Litany of the Undaunted and Wailing Host, and then you're looking at like Cindercoat, Mage Fist, Mantle of Channeling, some other things, the new staff for Cloud of Bats, or for Fire Bats in general, which we'll get to here in just a minute, and stuff like that. Let's see, what are we moving on to? So, the Aquila Cuirass, legendary power added. While above 75 to 85% primary resource, all damage taken is reduced by 50%. So the first thing that comes to mind for this is obviously like Carnival with the Legacy of Nightmares set, like we were just talking about, because you're not spending any resource, you're just spamming Poison Dart. Alternatively, you know, a build that's all like melee pets with like Plague of Toads or something like that, any primaries that you're not spending any mana, this could be really, really good. There's maybe some other specs where you are spending mana where you'd still stay above that threshold that could be possible to use this in, but more than likely it's going to be some kind of pet spec where your pets are doing the majority of the damage and you're not spending any resource at all. Alright, let's see. So, String of Ears, the melee reduction is now a legendary power and has been increased to 30%. So basically what this means is you're able to put it in the cube now as a legendary power, which is pretty nice. So, the Lacumbra's Ornament, new legendary bracers, reduces all damage taken by 5% for each stack of Soul Harvest you have. So, obvious synergy with Jade Harvester, although these can be ran in pretty much any build and just pop Soul Harvest into the build. Honestly, a lot of builds run Soul Harvest Languish anyways for the armor, and you get 25% additional damage reduction from these bracers. You just pop those right in, and definitely be seeing it ran in probably a lot of different builds, honestly. Manajuma's 2-set got basically doubled in damage. Angry Chicken bonus damage increased from 200% to 400%. So you're looking at, you know, the standard like Locust Swarm, 6-piece Arakier builds are even stronger now, along with, say, the Angry Chicken Ingeon builds where you're trying to just, you know, be an Angry Chicken form all the time and just blow up constantly. Got its damage doubled, which is pretty sick. Got a brand new legendary axe, the Mordulu's Promise. Firebomb generates 100 to 125 mana. Now again, one of those items that early on in the season could be really nice. I don't know if it's really going to be anything you're going to run too much. I could see running for fun. I remember back in Vanilla, I ran Firebomb builds because Firebomb is a lot of fun. You could run something like the Wailing Host, Litany of the Undaunted with this axe, and then if Depth Diggers are working for Witch Doctor, then using this axe should give you 100% more damage from the Depth Diggers, since this is going to generate mana. And just have like some fun Firebomb specs, similar to the Grasp of the Dead and Spear Barrage stuff I was talking about earlier, just for fun more than anything else. Now here's the big showcase, Raiment of the Jade Harvester, the 2-set bonus. Instant haunt damage dealt increased from 10 to 120 seconds worth. So basically when you haunt an enemy that's already haunted, you're dealing 120 seconds worth of your haunt damage, which is an insane amount. You're going to see like billions and billions of damage single target from this. 4-set bonus. Now also reduces the cooldown of Soul Harvest by 1 second when you cast Haunt or Locust Swarm. So you're able to Soul Harvest constantly. You're already stacking a good bit of CDR in the build, and then every time you cast Haunt, you're going to reduce the cooldown by 1 second to Soul Harvest a ton. So attack speed is actually a decent stat now in a Jade Harvester build. You're going to deal more single target damage with the 2-piece bonus, and then you're going to reduce the cooldown of Soul Harvest every time you cast that Haunt. The 6-piece bonus increased the amount of damage over time damage detonated by Soul Harvest to 300 seconds worth. So that's why you see the change to the Creeping Death up to 3600. Basically every time you Soul Harvest, you're going to detonate 300 seconds worth of the dot. So eventually you're going to have to reapply your dots, but until you've detonated all 3600 seconds, you don't have to worry about it. You can just basically run around and the dots will be doing their thing. Now obviously you're going to be spamming your Haunt still and reapplying it constantly because you want to deal damage with the 2-piece, but that's kind of how that works currently. So huge changes, really, really nice damage. Again, for T10, you're basically like one-shotting everything already at this point. And it should definitely have the damage in its current form for pretty high greater rifts. The thing that I'm worried about right now is survivability more than anything else. The damage seems to be there. The survivability I'm not quite sure about. Got a brand new ring to go along with this. The Ring of Emptiness, new legendary ring. You deal 75 to 100% increased damage to enemies affected by both your Haunt and a Locust Swarm. So, I mean, there's a lot of things you can do with this. You could cube this and go Focus and Restraint, but at that point, you've got to put a generator on your bar. I'm not sure that's really the way to go. You could go Ring of Emptiness, Convention of Elements, Unity, so you get damage there out of 2 rings, and then a good bit of mitigation. You could also go Ring of Royal Grandeur instead of the Unity possibly and add something else in there, and an armor slot maybe. There's a few options. From my testing so far, I think that Ring of Emptiness, Convention of Elements, Unity is probably one of the better options, but it's going to take some testing to really figure it out for sure. The Staff of Chiroptera, new legendary staff. Firebat's attacks 100% faster and costs 70 to 75% less mana. This is kind of the new staff that possibly is going to make Firebats and Cloud of Bats actually good this patch. And it's really a little too soon to tell. I haven't tested it myself yet. I've seen a few people running it a little bit, and it does seem like it's going to be pretty good. And I think they are going to try to make Firebats good in this patch. Hopefully, like a Firebats and Jade build are both viable for pushing by the end of the PTR. Vile Hive, new legendary mojo. Locust Swarm gains the effect of the Pestilence rune and deals 45 to 60% increased damage. So far from what I've seen, I don't think this is honestly all that great. It looks good on paper, but then you think about it, and if you're running Pestilence from this, and then you've got another rune on your bar, none of the other poison runes are all that great, and then the runes that are actually good besides Pestilence are other damage types. So then you're not able to double dip with like your poison damage on your bracers and stuff like that. And honestly, 60% damage multiplier isn't very much in the first place, and then on top of that, Locust Swarm isn't even all that much of your damage. Like Locust Swarm compared to Haunt is not very much damage in the grand scheme of your damage in like an 80 Greater Rift, right? Like your Pestilence is going to group mobs for you really well. It's going to give you the Ring of Emptiness damage buff, and it's going to be doing a good bit of damage, don't get me wrong, but compared to Haunt, it's hardly anything. So to make this viable, I feel like they need to maybe rework the Locust Swarm runes a little bit, and they need to bump up the damage increase by quite a lot. 60% just isn't enough of a multiplier there. We got Vu's Juicer, one of the better names, I would say, in this patch. New legendary dagger. Spirit Barrage gains the effect of the Phlebotomize and the Spirit is Willing runes, and then rolls with 45 to 60% Spirit Barrage damage. This is pretty sick. New dagger, again, that goes with the changes and the buffs to Spirit Barrage for a fun build. Wilkin's Reach, new legendary mojo, removes the cooldown of Grasp of the Dead, and then rolls with 45 to 60% Grasp of the Dead damage. So again, a Rain of Corpses build where you just spam Rain of Corpses all over the place. It stacks, it has no cooldown. Should be a lot of fun. Alright, several existing class-specific legendary items have been updated to include a unique legendary power. So what they did with Witch Doctor is they made Last Breath, the 15-20 seconds Mass Confusion cooldown reduction, a legendary power so you can cube it now, as well as the Thing of the Deep. The 20-yard pickup radius is now legendary power, so you're able to cube that 20 pickup radius, which is pretty nice. And then there was one bug fix. Fixed an issue that caused the Locust Swarms cast by Wormwood to generate fetishes from Belt of Transcendence. So we now know that this was a bug and it was never actually intended to be the case. So there you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll have a lot more PTR content coming out soon. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.